My name is Maggie Breslin. I am the Creative and Program Director for the Patient Revolution, which is the organizational backbone for a movement for care. And some of you I definitely recognize. I see many of our fellows and other members of our community here on this call. And some names I'm not as familiar with. So if this is the first time that you've kind of found your way to the Patient Revolution, really thrilled to have you here. As an organization, we are working to kind of bring together a community, a global community of people who are working towards care in healthcare. And we are thrilled to have all of you here to kind of help in that sort of work. We started earlier this year these town hall meetings, and our goal was really to be able to create something that would be available to the entire community and would begin to give some exposure to some of the work that's happening within our community and to kind of foster some of the conversations that we think are really important and kind of critical to be having as part of the movement for care. And so this is our fourth one. So a successful first year. Our goal was to do one quarterly. And so we're really thrilled with the group and the kind of community that we have here today. And so myself and Semhar, who is my collaborative kind of partner here at Patient Revolution, will be manning the chat and we'll kind of be organizing and structuring the day a little bit. If anybody has any questions or anything about Patient Revolution or any issues on the call, you can feel free to reach out to us via the chat, and we will do what we can to help. And with that, I am absolutely thrilled to turn it over to our guests for today to lead us through a conversation to sort of spark some ideas and some thinking. And then we'll have a bit of an open discussion here all together, and then we'll allow all of you a little bit of breakout time. So putting you into smaller groups of 4 or 5 so that you can talk a little bit about some of the ideas that have been shared today and how they might impact or reflect upon your own work. Our guests today are Lekshmy Parameswaran and László Herczeg from the Care Lab in Barcelona, Spain. Lesh and László are not only dear friends and collaborators of mine for the last many years, but also they're Patient Revolution Fellows, which is our community of practice that brings together those who are working. They're sporting their swag today. They're wearing their Cultivate Care t-shirts and sweatshirts, which we can put the link for those into the chat as well, Semhar. So if people want to style themselves up for the holidays, they can absolutely do that. The Care Lab is an extraordinary studio practice that has been at the forefront of doing a lot of the work of trying to build out the conditions for care in which it can thrive around the globe. And today they're going to share with us some of those stories, some of the things that they've learned, and really help us kind of support the conversation that I know is so critical to so many people, which is how do we take these ideas that we have or our recognition of the ways in which healthcare the ecosystem needs to change in order for healthcare to thrive, and what does that actually look like, and how do we make that happen? And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lesh and László, and so thrilled to have you guys here on Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie, and lovely to be here. Let's start with some intros. It's true, we've been working as designers in the healthcare space for a long time, and that's how we met with Maggie more than a decade back. And actually in that time, we came to a very strong realization really in the last handful of years. We'd worked in various healthcare innovation projects in different systems around the world. And we realized that actually we identified much more strongly with calling ourselves care activists, and designers was kind of a second point to mention. And what did this actually mean? It meant that we wanted to look more broadly at care and not just healthcare as a sector, but to consider social care and education. We also realized we had quite a strong point of view. We were not great consultants, but we really had our own agenda. And we cared deeply about a lot of the care gaps that we saw in many different systems. And oftentimes they were universal gaps that were just not serving people the way we deserve to be served. So we decided to take a more proactive stance with our practice and to become a mission-driven practice. And by that meaning, we understand where we can contribute our design capabilities and our design viewpoints, and we actively seek out initiatives and create engagements and partnerships. So becoming care activists actually opened the door to meeting a lot of other care activists who were also coming at this from different professions and practices. And it became a way to form a much bigger community and have a greater, louder voice and actually more power to push the status quo within the system. It's how we met the Patient Revolution, our fellow care activists there, but also the Compassion Revolution is another network that we connect to along very similar values and mission that are based in Australia. And I think Mary may be in her pajamas on the line right now with us. And the last community that we wanted to mention is here in Catalonia, which is where Barcelona is based. So within Catalonia, we have an alliance and a group that are pushing for a national system of care called Xarxa per Dret a Cura. So these are other networks of care activists who are working towards the same change. And what we can bring as designers is what we want to share with you today.
Yeah, and maybe just one thing to add on this, that we also over the years, through our design work, we realized that the really impactful part of our job is not actually what we are designing, but how we can create or design the conditions for care to happen. And this is quite a bit different sort of like viewpoint, and we would like to explain a little bit our approach today. But this also sort of like made us think that our main impact is really organization change or culture change with our project, that the design intervention may be the starter, but we are really aiming for these longer and deeper changes.
So to begin with some definitions, we're always asked, being the care lab, how do you define care? And actually, this is an invitation we included for all of you coming into today's session, is we're really intrigued at how personal that definition is. And so we set up a platform called What is Care to invite people from around the world, from different backgrounds, to share with us their own definition. And here you see a few that have been pulled from that repository, which is a growing repository. And for us, it's really interesting to open up a dialogue around what care means for people. And so a few to just call out here, one that resonates strongly with the Patient Revolution framing around care is care being seen as this act of noticing and responding. So this reciprocal interaction, which is really beautiful way of thinking about the interaction of care. We also have one here where someone said it's to be looked after by someone who carries your interest in their hearts, above and beyond, and asks for nothing in return. So you really feel that there are many stories behind these definitions. And so for us, this is a really inspiring starting point to unpack care. So as we looked back on our practice over the last few years, we started to kind of spot some patterns, especially around the projects that drove transformation, where we really saw change possible and change happening on the ground and impacting real people's lives. And so looking at how those sorts of projects happened, we realized that there was a much sharper way to define what it is we do as the Care Lab. And we've been working with this term, we're calling it care-centered practices. And the idea is that they reflect an attitude and approach that puts care as a value, really in the center of this approach. And it basically, it breaks down into 3 main stages. We're interested here in not only the intervention that enables care to happen as an outcome, but also care as a value that drives how we work. So not only what we do, but how we do it. In the first phase, you see, it's all about finding partners that share a common intention and that can gather around a common kind of goal and align values in how to drive forward that goal. This is something that we've done with the Patient Revolution, but also with a lot of different partners and organizations in this space. And that then leads into defining the what, which is where we're going to focus today's sharing, because we are looking at how do we design the conditions for care to thrive. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to design those conditions. And then finally, the last stage of care-centered design practice is really looking beyond the outputs and really journeying to see and try and sense the change and actually evaluate, to some extent, measure the impact that's possible. We like to call this phase gardening, and we'll explain a bit more about that later. But it's really when the change is implemented, but also sustained. And you'll see that this approach is deliberately visualized circular, because we don't believe that with one single project we can, actually shift the system, but it's something that iteratively grows. And so we focus on topics that we care about, and we do several different interventions to problem care rather than problem solve. And in that way, try to, over time, try to shift and transform the systems of care. Zooming into the second phase of care-centered design practice, this is a framework or a tool that we use to really understand and approach that act of, designing the conditions for care to thrive. So it's a simple plant, and you see above ground the elements that are visible, the leaves, the stem, and below the ground you see the roots and the soil. And the reason this is helpful is it allows us to both understand what is happening within a current care gap or a current care challenge, but then also identify the ways in which, as design and designers, we can act. And so let's just take step by step. I'm going to just walk you through this framework. So when we're thinking about the stem and the leaves, what we're doing it's really trying to understand things that we can see within the system. So this could be interactions with products or with services that are in that space. It could be the way in which people talk to one another, how they move through the space, how they communicate, or even how they might adapt the space around them. So with that understanding, the kinds of interventions we could consider relate to tools or products or services, and even the space design and interior architecture, for example. The next level is really looking at the organizational culture. And here we're really trying to understand, the way in which people within the organization, how they conduct their services, how practices run. So this includes seeing the kind of training they might have, the sorts of protocols or processes that are in place, also an organization's mission and vision and how they measure themselves in terms of performance. So KPIs are one of the ways to sort of understand how an organization functions. With that, we can think about interventions that are on that level of developing new team practices and rituals or training programs, developing theory of change frameworks that can apply, or defining new operating procedures and KPIs as well. And then finally, the soil level, which is really that culture change level that László was mentioning. Down here, you have really structural underlying conditions. These are invisible, they're kind of intrinsic, they're somewhat hidden beneath, the things that we can see above ground. And this is where we might dig down and understand what are the stigmas or taboos that exist. What is the backdrop, the kind of archetypes that may kind of pervade that particular area of care? What are the policies here from a sector or governmental level? Leadership frameworks and approach and mindset as well are important. And so how do you start to shift on that level? Some of the interventions are to feed the development of new policies, to identify partnership opportunities, even to develop leadership mentoring programs or training and education programs, as well as this more sensitization or awareness building campaign. So you can see that if, in order to unpack and understand the system, but then shift the system, it's helpful to think about these different dimensions around the factors that nurture care or impede it. And by breaking it down in this way, it gives us an entry point to think about what kind of systemic interventions can we design to create the conditions for care to thrive. So we're going to be coming back to this a little bit later, but many of these elements and factors, for those of you familiar with the patient revolution, they really kind of work in harmony. They align a lot with our thinking within the patient revolution, where we talk about culture, policy, space, and processes all as different ingredients or factors that we can work on to shift, the status quo.
So we would like to show you a few examples of our projects. In our projects, we are trying to do as much as possible, from the stems to the soil. But even just knowing that the soil that we maybe in some projects we can't change, just to be aware of the soil that is already really enriching our projects and helping us to make the systemic change that we are aiming at. So this first project we wanted to share with you is called Oasis. It's a daycare hospice, and this is in Singapore. And we've been doing this project with radical philanthropy organization, the Lian Foundation, and the care provider, which is HCA, which is the biggest hospice care provider in Singapore. They mainly provide the home hospice care, but they have quite recently opened 3 daycare facilities. And we also worked with an architect practice called Lekshmy Architects. And so how did we design the conditions for care to thrive in this hospice? The first thing I think it's interesting to mention is that we really try to reposition the services and the overall positioning around growth, which is, you might say, it's a bit strange in a hospice where people spend their last couple of months. But it was really the realization that growth is meaningful for everyone, not only the clients or the families, but also the people who work there. And by reframing this, it really gave us a different way to look at hospice care services. We also designed the qualities of the space. That is, you can see the bar on the left side. It's basically the first thing people see when they come in. They see a lively bar. You can actually have your drink on ice. And it really contributed to address this taboo that the entire society have, thinking of what is going on inside a hospice as such. So that was the first one, to really reposition the service. The second one was to rethink the interaction. So we really designed this framework in which every interaction is a conversation, really creating this meaningful relationship-making interaction that is a conversation that allows and empowers people in their growth. And again, everyone involved in their growth. So we designed various conversation kits. So you can see on the top middle is an end-of-life conversation kit with the cookies and trigger question. But we also, designed different kind of conversation tool for the staff as well. The third way we designed the conditions to care was really think about the organization, the care providing organization, the care teams. And together we designed an intervention that we called Munch and Grow. And this is basically a practice that they do every 2 to 3 months. They close the center for 1 day and they concentrate on themselves, on individually and professionally, what growth means to them, why they are doing this job, and how they can do it better as a team. It's not capability development, it's really a point of reflection that is like designed in structurally. And you can see on the middle bottom, this is a card set, a tool that we designed to help the teams reflect on what kind of culture they have in the organization. One really important impact that this project made is in the end of this project, we needed to write job description for a service experience officer role, which is really the first of a kind in a long-term care sector in Singapore, but we haven't actually heard anywhere else. And this person was really, their job was to really make sure that this interaction and these experiential qualities stay impact, throughout implementation. And then the challenge, to talk about some challenge here, was the challenge lays actually in the underlying condition about the taboo of what is happening in these kind of places, but also for the care team to come and work in a place like this and have a different kind of mindset of what they need to do, what is their work. Their work is not only about caring for people, but also to care for this atmosphere to make people feel, looked after and experience growth. So that was quite difficult, I think, to find these people, and it's continuously difficult. And this is one of the biggest challenge in a project like this.
So let me tell you another story. This is a project that we did back in 2015, actually, with the National Council for Social Service, which is an organization, again, this is in Singapore. They sit across hundreds of voluntary sector organizations that are deploying services to support everyone from persons with dementia to kids with disability, to those with learning special needs, etc. So they are an umbrella organization, and they had a really exciting opportunity that they created to do a deep dive to understand the role of the family caregiver. So not the patient, not the client, but the person that journeys with that patient or client throughout their care experience. So it was the first time for us to have this chance to look at a role that is pervasive, but is also a role that is commonly overlooked by health and care systems, And we worked with 5 different charities to understand then the kind of experience of complex caregiving. And it was a 9-month deep dive. So in that journey, some of the things that we developed and we wanted to call out, because we think that this is really what contributed to changing the conditions around caregiving, in this case in Singapore. The first is these series of films that you see running. We created a set of insights
while we were
that were explaining the 7 different emotions of caregiving based on accompanying 10 different families through their journey. And these films, together with the sketch scenarios that you see on the top right, this was a way for us to use our kind of design capabilities to make tangible, make visible, but also make shareable the challenges and needs of caregivers, and also point towards potential opportunities and future scenarios. And so that was one kind of intervention that was co-created with caregivers, but also with frontline teams and with leaders from across, different areas of service, everyone working with the same design triggers to reimagine support for caregivers. The other intervention that was co-created is the image on the bottom that you see, this little brown book, which is a toolkit for social workers to work with caregivers. So currently, at that time, they were trained to work with their clients, and there was very little training and tools to support them, to support the caregiver in the families that they were working with. And so through our partners at NCSS, we developed this toolkit and they deployed a training program. Singapore, there are 4 main languages, 4 main communities that make up the nation. So this toolkit was translated and they rolled out the program. They took that, implemented that particular solution moving forward. But I guess for us, the big kind of shift in our practice came partly from this project, where the timing, we got lucky in that the government were at the point of launching their new disability master plan. It's called an enabling master plan. And so they had the 2016 5-year plan ready to go when we were doing this work. And in the end, it was decided to incorporate one single chapter to caregivers and support for caregivers. So this work was plugged into the policy document, and over the next 5 years following the project, there were resources to really implement many of these changes. So it's actually made us realize the ways in which we might be able to contribute to real structural change. And if you fast forward, we were in Singapore doing a project a couple of years ago with a network of schools that support kids with disabilities. And one of the stakeholders that we were able to engage with was a caregiver liaison role. And it turns out that this role was one of the results from the first project to uplift, the issues around caregiving. And the government created this role and deployed it across the sector. And we were able to then work with somebody who was tasked with and had the responsibilities of caring for caregivers within our project that was for Rainbow Schools. And so this is an example of what I was describing, that circular effect of being able to, with different actions over time, kind of build upon the changes that you push to see happen.
And that's also problem caring, the way we describe it, how it used to be. As designers, we focused on problem solving, which is really like trying to solve a particular need. And I think moving more and more to problem caring is really take one topic and try to proactively work on it and create opportunities to partner up with. So this project that is Life at the End of Life Festival, this is one of this example. So this is an end of life festival that we initiated this year in Barcelona, and it is about basically end of life end of life and death and dying. And the aim of this festival is trying to bring maybe new ways that people, citizens, can sort of reflect this this idea of talking about and making choices about end of life earlier in life, when they still can, you know. And it's the problem caring, because we started working on this topic of end of life over 10 years ago. And here in Barcelona, we initiated this this year. And just to mention, we partnered up with the Grifols Foundation here in Barcelona, as well as the Catalan Society of Palliative Care and the National Pediatric Society of Palliative Care. So we really managed to together create this festival. And the way we try to design the conditions for care in this project was really through these cultural interventions that was placed in people's path. So you can see on the right top picture, it's the underground in Barcelona, and we had these trigger questions for people to think about in a kind of light way about their choice of decisions that they could think of. We also, what you can see on the left, we also organized this event of a Buddhist monk talking for, in this case, design students, what is the Buddhist point of death and dying. And you can see on the top with the lady singing with the man with the hat. This was an event. It was a pop-up event of a street musician we organized in a kind of an aging expo, which was like an expo for old people. And we just implanted ourselves there, and we allowed anyone to ask the music that they would like to be played at the funeral. And there was really amazing sort of like engagement and discussions, and people crying, and everyone was crying, and it was very, very, very touching. And yeah, so the impact of this festival was really to change and open up the debate. And many organizations and individuals came and we're very happy that we created this platform for the first festival. And of course, our intention is, and we are in this moment organizing the second edition and fundraising for the second edition. And our intention that this is becoming, an annual festival in Barcelona, and also ultimately to be able to see this in other places around the world. And of course, the challenge, if I would think about the challenge of this, is that it was quite challenging to drive such a movement, and also to partner up with organization and create something from nothing, and have this, have the kind of drive to continue to do this. But that's the problem carrying, that sort of like makes us going.
And this is almost the last story. This project is actually, we just had a call this morning for the last touch point with the team on this project. It's a Singapore project, and the intention was to co-design and demonstrate a new community-based model for dementia care in one particular neighborhood in Singapore called Ang Mo Kio. And we were working together with AWA, which is one of the biggest elder care service providers, and specifically the team that is running their dementia daycare in this neighborhood. So we were working with them, and also with Radical Philanthropy Group, again, the Lien Foundation, and a couple of other partners, ILO Architects and Trisector, who are a government lobby agency that use impact evaluation to lobby for policy change. So it was really, really interesting mix of partners. And the main kind of vision around this project, or the concept here, was to think about how we might create this community-based model of dementia care that would go beyond the walls of the daycare center. So the project was called Care Beyond Walls. So imagine how we might support persons with dementia and their families in the neighborhood by sensitizing the neighborhood and all the different stakeholders there, but also really thinking about care for persons with dementia from the point of view of who they are as a person, what is their story, and developing a personalized care plan that could allow them to continue to contribute in their community. So how do you think about the residual capacity they have as the disease progresses, and how do you connect that to meaningful, purposeful volunteership and contribution within the community in which they sit? So some of the interventions here, thinking about this ecosystem of support, included the design and co-design of an engagement model for AWA to develop partnerships within this ecosystem. So that means, how do they reach out and connect with the local schools, libraries, businesses, the local temple and mosque, for example, places of worship. Animal sanctuaries were also another partner. So they've managed over the 4 years of this project to build up a network of partners that are involved in supporting persons with dementia to volunteer within their settings. And the image on the top right is one of these volunteership opportunities in the local Hindu temple that's within this neighborhood. Of course, this way of operating, again, as we talked about, it's a culture change ultimately. And for AWA, for the care team to learn through the process, different ways that they might engage with their community. So one of our objectives was to transfer certain designerly skills around participation design, co-creation and engagement, so that the frontline teams could actually work with us and be the ones reaching out to co-create with the community. And in this way, they would develop the skills and the mindset and the confidence as well for that to become part of the way in which their services would evolve and be delivered. And in thinking about care beyond walls, there was a really important new physical space that was incorporated here. It was called a kind of social space within the community. So it doesn't sit in the daycare and it's not entirely separate within the community, but a kind of interim space. And this would be where the community can come in and engage, and it really wouldn't be about dementia care kind of on the front stage, but it could be a way of detecting dementia earlier within the community, as well as offering support to caregivers and co-creating programming that would then adapt over time. So ultimately, it would be AWA that might be running this space, but over time, gradually, it would be co-run by the community. And they are working towards a moment where one of the sets of keys could actually be given to a community leader, in that this space becomes really something that they share together and that they run together. In terms of impact, we visited just last month to see some of these services and practices kind of running. They just finally launched the whole program. It's been a staggered launch. And I think the social space definitely creates this alternative meeting point between the service and the community. And at the media launch that they had, it was actually the partners that they established that told the stories of how this service is running. So I think that's also a kind of effect of being able to sustain a new model like this with the partners involved in helping that thrive and run. The overall goal is that this was a demonstration project, and we just heard this morning that the team have been asked to create a playbook for the sector, with the idea that there could be other neighborhoods that want to replicate this approach and to take elements of this set of interventions and create their own kind of fertile ground and start to develop their own community-based models for dementia care. So if you remember, the very last stage of the care-centered design practice was really looking at how you might sense the change. And I think I mentioned we refer to this as gardening, because in our minds, there are a number of seeds and little seedlings that have been co-created through a process like this. But ultimately, they need to be planted and they need to be tended to in order for them to really thrive and sustain and maintain any kind of change. So it was helpful to think about this as a gardening phase, and we become gardeners. And what does that mean? We kind of shift from designer mode to being more like coaches or mentors, like a sounding board, keeping the red thread and the original intention intact as the organization and the teams work to really implement and embed these changes. And so the challenge with that is that, you know, obviously in that phase, it can be very long lasting, and a lot of different changes can happen along the way. So there's a lot of risk to manage, but at the same time, there's also an opportunity to be surprised and to see which ideas really take root and which are which don't make it or evolve to something new. So one of the ways we decided to approach this was by developing a specific tool within care-centered design practice that you're looking at here. And it's a way for us to understand all the different things, all the different factors in this gardening phase that are either in our control or not in our control, that we together with an organization can somehow be prepared for. So if any of you are gardeners, you know, the seasons come and go, and you kind of know with each season what you need to get ready for and what might be happening. So there's an element of forward thinking and planning, but at the same time being ready for the unknowns. So we have 4 different kind of categories of triggers to help us and the organization teams think through this particular phase. The top one, the climate, are things that are really external conditions. There are factors that we can't really control, and they can either help or they can hinder. It's a bit like the weather. Sunny day, tons of rain, no rain, you know, we can only see so far ahead. What this relates to could be changes on the level of policy. It could be financial backdrop, so new funding streams coming through or even being cut off. Shifts in the industry, or we put force majeure to just catch all pandemics and anything that is truly out of the known. And then pollinators are all those good things that help a garden thrive. So the factors that can lead to solutions really flourishing and driving the change. And here you could think of new partnerships or alliances that really activate or catalyze certain changes, inspiring the team themselves, the team finding new perspectives and practices, and even changes maybe on HR policy that also create, you know, that can be a pollinator to actually kickstart or give room for certain ideas to really take root and to establish. And then, of course, you have pests in a garden. Undesirable factors. These can create problems and stop solutions thriving. A typical one is scope creep, so delays and, you know, time lag between blocking changes coming through. It can be a lack of leadership or accountability within an organization, lack of leadership support, and even down to kind of individual, you know, toxicity within teams and toxic team members, in the sense of, you know, there are people that are resisting the change. Not to say that we need to kill them off, but we need to figure out how to be ready, you know, to handle different types of pests that can get in the way of a change that has been co-created and being pushed through by everyone. And then finally, the soil level is really that level of what we said, embedded structural factors that can either get in the way or help solutions to thrive. And again, it can be on the level of leadership. It could be to do with the space. The hospices that we've worked with in the past, we've met them at a moment that they were moving to brand new facilities. And so that opens up a possibility for new things. That isn't always the case. You might have limitations with the location. You could have legal or regulatory barriers on this level. And then on the societal level, you have all kinds of perceptions that can block. So for example, in end-of-life care, the taboos that we talked about can also be something that we consider on this soil level needs to be worked upon. So thinking about gardening with these multiple levels is we've seen that it's helpful in that final phase of the transformation where our team starts to really step out, and the team that is on the ground and the communities that have been engaged are the ones driving forward the change. And this is really about how can we support them in being able to, sustain that and manage that towards impact. So a little teaser, because this is not a story that we can tell in completion yet. It's a project that we are right in the middle of here in Catalonia. And it's a project that's working on the soil level. We have been asked to support a regional participation exercise to really gather inputs from patients, caregivers, professionals, and decision makers and leaders from across the healthcare system in Catalonia to give input to defining a set of design principles that will be used to develop the new electronic medical record of the future for Catalonia. So it's a very long project up to 2030. We're just doing our part, which is one of the foundation steps. And yeah, we're really excited about the opportunity to contribute. We were joking that it's kind of like our Sagrada Familia project in that it will take several generations to come to full fruition, and it is not really for us, but it's for, for the generations to come. So yeah, we hope to be able to circle back and tell that story next year once we get through this first phase of the work, but just, we wanted to mention it. That's enough from us, I think. We wanted to pause here, and there could have been some comments or questions in the chat, but we're open to hear your thoughts, reflections.
Yeah. There haven't been a ton of questions or anything in the chat, but I would love to kind of hear from the community if anybody wants to raise their hand or kind of ask a question. We, in particular, sought out this town hall with the Care Lab because we hear so often from people the questions about how do you advance this work? How do you in your organization or in your community begin to try and make it more careful and kind, or to create the conditions again in which careful and kind care is sort of more likely to thrive. And so the hope is that some of the things that you heard about today or have kind of sparked questions or relate to work that you maybe have done within your own spaces. And so would love to hear about that and any questions or thoughts that anybody might have. So Nadine did say that she would love to see the wheel, the full view without the hand with those levers, the previous slide. I'm not sure which part that is exactly. But Marie, would you like to go ahead and ask a question? And then Nadine will send out some of the material as well. Marie.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you. Thank you both for this awesome presentation. I was really, really happy to attend last minute. Well, among the tons of questions I have, maybe one of them is how much skills training and professional training takes place in the project you run, because most of your projects imply a shift and a real reflection on professional skills. And I was wondering whether you also consider yourself as trainer or design professional trainings for other people to sorry, I'm lacking some of my English words. So yeah, how about professional training, and how do you also design this invisible side to make sure the projects are activated and that have chances to survive the real life? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It kind of crept up on us. It's true that invariably with this type of work, there was a need for new types of training. For example, conversation skills training, or even training in the sense of team working and collaboration and what that means. So you're right, in many of these projects, it wasn't the intention going in, but we came to realize that it was a necessary addition to also provide a training element around some of the tools and around some of the new practices that came through in the work. So oftentimes the wheel of life, or these munch and grow cards that I think László was just zooming in on, come together with a description of how they work, how they can be used, but also co-developing with the team a set of practices that they can literally practice behaviors, and then that naturally folds then into training, but also looking at what kind of capabilities they're hiring into the organization. So I definitely think, yes, it has opened up a need to support around training and capability building, capability development. Sometimes that's explicit and intentional, that's an objective from the start. Like with the project for AWA, they asked us to consider that, to work with their team so that by the end of the project, there was this transferring of skills and capabilities and mindset. And in other times, it's very much training wrapped around specific interventions in order to make them really easier for organizations to grasp and to run with and to make their own. Do you want to add something?
No, I think
That's great. We also had a question about your 3 stages of the wheel around is there one part of that process that you see patients being able to be more involved with or most involved with, or do you see a role for patients in all of those?
You want to answer it? The role for patients in this?
I think patients can have a role in all of this, depending, of course, what kind of overall role they have in such a transformation. I think so, because of the first stage is this partnering for common purpose. It's really important that the partnership is the right one. And by the way, it's really important that in healthcare, for example, patients sit there and they are a key partner around the table. And I think going through all the way and staying with the problem, it's like the problem caring. I think this is the way that we can, facilitate these transformations that need to be really deep, and they need to be, with the involvement of these partners who really believe in this kind of transformation.
I think typically the idea of participation was in that middle step with the idea where co-creation happens. I think what we're seeing and what we're pushing for is that patients, as László said, are involved in the steps before and after as well. So it isn't this extracting of insights process, but it's much more a caring approach to participation and in really involving them from the start. So, for example, in some of the work around system transformation, we've been looking at how to create almost like an engine within that's driving the change that is manned primarily by patients. So actually they become a key partner in that first stage of the process. They become an integral part of the whole effort, not only giving their input in the design and co-design of interventions, but also in establishing partnerships that can help in the implementation steps. So how do you keep them involved? And it's a bit like Marie's question about training. This is starting to become something that's very intentional from the beginning of any project or program, is that we think how are patients participating, what is the most meaningful and caring way to involve them, and to plan that in. So it isn't just recruiting for a co-design session, it's really thinking about how they can be partner in the change.
Great. We also have a question from Sophia. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you both so much for sharing all this work with us. One of the questions that I had was around within that garden system, as you were thinking about, if you could share a little bit more about how you think about measurement, particularly measuring impact in those lower levels, like underneath the ground in terms of the roots and the soil and changes in how people are thinking and, you know, what that conversation is. Because I think, you know, traditionally I see a lot more in terms of like the hard metrics, KPIs, things like that. But I'd love to know how you're thinking about some of these more cultural conversations and how to measure the impact in that sense.
Mm-hmm. This is something, and I think she's on the line, Nuria Villarasau, one of our team, has been working a lot on developing an impact evaluation strategy or kind of framework that we can use as the Care Lab, because just as you say, I think we're encountering the fact that a lot of indicators are kind of built around the existing paradigms that we have within care. And so you're absolutely right. We're having to kind of think more creatively and find more nuanced ways of measuring or evaluating the softer changes, even the culture changes and organizational changes that we're looking at. So we have to somehow, I don't have a straight answer for you because it's something that we're building, but we are trying to also do that in partnership and trying to do that from the very start of the whole process. So amongst the partners, identifying what are the key metrics of change, whether that's from the clinical or from the cultural, from the social or economic standpoint, trying to identify those, at least a first hypothesis quite early, and then evolve it through the whole process. So to look at the underlying conditions, like this morning, we were with the AWA team doing a final reflection after 4 years of work and really looking back on some of the things that had changed. And they're a very clinically focused team. There's a care provider, and they were realizing they want to circle back and actually do some more qualitative research to talk to members of their community, people who have been affected by these new services, and to start to gather stories. And I know with Patient Revolution and with Maggie, we've talked a lot, about how do you gather these stories and analyze them and extract the learnings from them that then can walk hand in hand with some of the harder, more quantitative metrics that are not just the obvious ones, but that could be more straightforward to measure. So I'm not answering your question, but this is just some of the thinking around how we need to crack this and how we need to develop that toolkit, for sensing the change.
We'd love to have you back to talk about that as it evolves. There's also a couple of questions about sort of funding and sustainability, talking a little bit about how and collaboration kind of amongst nonprofits. And I know you alluded to that in some of your work, and would love to hear a little bit more about what have been some of the ebbs and flows for you all in the last handful of years as you've kind of focused in on this care work in terms of that funding and partnership piece.
This is the favorite question.
Mhm.
We haven't figured this out yet. But I think in a way, we had a healthcare focused design practice about 6-7 years ago before we started the Care Lab. And this was really like a consultancy-based kind of practice. And it was sort of like, you know, we ran in this kind of business model that we've been hired to do a job, solve a problem, and we did it. And then once we solved the problem, we needed to go and they did whatever they wanted to do with it. And obviously this was a more transactional sort of like a business model, but also more transactional. We felt a more transactional relationship. And so once we sort of like reflected and created this practice that in which we realized that we are care activists, somehow the whole approach changed, and we realized that instead of waiting for calls and projects to fall upon us, we needed to have a much more proactive role in the work that we are doing, as well as we needed to have more power in a way around the table. And so with this new way of working, we increasingly start to create opportunities in which we go to, we go with a certain mission we want to achieve to an organization who might also want to achieve that. And then together we go and try to get funding. So in this, our sort of like, strength is very different. We have more power at the table, as well as we are, partnering up along a certain value or mission. And so it's also a much deeper relationship. So this is where we are now. We are like the festival, we are fundraising, and it's like we are doing what Maggie and Sheila is doing. And the little black book is limited, but this, we feel it gives us much more agency and also much more meaning to the work we need to do.
James is asking where he can learn more. And so would love to have you guys answer that. And the other half of his question is, when will the recording be available? And we will send that out this week, probably tomorrow or Thursday. Depends a little bit on workloads and being able to get it edited and kind of up. But in terms of the Care Lab, do you guys want to share a little bit about where people can learn more about y'all's work?
Sure. I think as we're closing, Semha was gonna put into the chat, we have a manifesto where you can read about the mission, what we stand for, and what we do. I would also invite you to explore the website, but also to be in touch. So hello@thecarelab.org is a really easy way to reach out to us. We have people doing that, coming in through the website or writing directly. We love to connect. If you see something that, a topic that you also care about, or you want to join forces and see whether we might align around a particular goal, then we're definitely open. It's one of the reasons we love to do events like this, is to find out who else is frustrated and wants to see change and believes that we might have a better chance if we work together.
Excellent. Marie.
Sorry, I'm so enthusiastic. I would love to steal the conversation a lot. So it's not a question, it's maybe more a reflection. I was really interested to see how you present super large-scale proposals, such as frameworks and supposedly smaller things like a game cards or the little macaroon, the little cookies and stuff like that. And it really rings a bell with Ezio Manzini's book. I was recently reading about acupuncture. It's as if you were working at this acupuncture level, tackling the right points that have a more global effect, regardless of the supposedly innovative way. I mean, the innovation is not to be seen in what we see. It's more in the process, and I much enjoy seeing super small symbolic proposals that have a broader effect and impact, but are very familiar and seem very simple and easy to reach. And I think it's really a key factor for engagement, that it sounds very familiar and harmful, harmless, like it looks nice and you want to go. And so, and it's not so often that people that are designer, even if I know it's second now that you are care activist, even on the sweater. So yeah, just thank you for that, because it's there's a lack of this very acupuncture level of design nowadays. So it's good to see it. Thanks.
It's a good vision. It's a good image. I love the acupuncture. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we always like in the town halls, I know we've been together as a big group, but we always like to give you all a little bit of time to get into a smaller group and meet some of the other people who are here and hear a little bit about their work and kind of what this has prompted. So we'll put you into small groups for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then kind of come back. And if you need a prompt, Lesh and László have put together some questions, thinking about the work you're doing or could be doing, and where you want to make change happen. In what ways can you act, and in what ways can you nurture? So hopefully that gives you a leaping off spot. We will put you into groups now and call you back a few minutes before the end of time, the end of our time, not all time. And we're just feel free to add things to the chat or any additional kind of comments that people want. So, okay, I'm going to open up the rooms.